Alejo Porras is a graphic designer, storyteller, and he specializes in sketchnotes. I met him a few months ago at a conference that I was speaking at, and when I was done, he came up to me and handed me this. It was a summary of everything that I had said, but designed in a really cool way. The pictures, the graphics, he nailed every single point that I made and actually drew it better than what I said. Apparently, this is a thing. There are artists who specialize in creating visual summaries of lectures, talks, to help people remember what was shared. Now, this is a cool idea, but how do you market something like this? What Alejo told me he does is kind of surprising. In this conversation, you're going to hear how he uses voluntary generosity to grow his business, the active listening techniques that he uses that helps him become a better creator, and a step-by-step walkthrough of how he markets these sketch notes. This, my friends, is the brilliant Alejo Porras.
When I was accepted to the university here in the United States, I was very excited, and I felt like I was going to come here to learn and to enjoy and to be nurtured by everything and everybody here. And my mentor at the time sit with me before I left and told me, I'm so happy that you get to live this experience. I just want to remind you something. You may think that you're going there to get something, to learn, to enjoy, to grow. And that's partially true. But maybe, just maybe, you're going there because you have the answer to a prayer somebody. You carry a gift with you. Remember that. Everywhere you go, you bring something. Don't just keep it to yourself.
You sent me this message. It says, the biggest driver of the opportunities I've had in business have come from moments when I decided to offer what I do generously with the intent to help. Yeah. That is a really powerful statement and one that raises a question mark because it sounds sweet. It sounds really sweet. But when you think about like tactically, what does that look like? And are you really serious when you said the biggest driver of opportunities you've had in business have come when you decided to help? Can you explain what that means?
Yes. The premise of that, and something that I tell my son, even though he's 5, is that if you ever want to make money at all, the only thing that you need to learn in life is how to be helpful. Because essentially, being in business is giving somebody else something that can help them with a problem or a challenge that they have in exchange for money. And if you're not helpful, you have no business. And that's pretty much the premise of that. So when you, before even started into trying to think about how to make money, your first concern should be how what I do helps others and really helps others. And that's especially challenging, I've seen, for creatives like me, illustrators and people in this industry, because we tend to think that what we do, the value that it has is that it's pretty, that it's cool, and that's what it brings. And there's something to that, but for the most part, people who pay us for our services are looking for something else, are either looking to promote something that they have, are looking to communicate an idea that they're trying to show to the world. So when we understand what's the use of what we do, and we actually leverage it to be helpful to the other person, with the primary concern of I'm doing this for helping others, then we can have a more impactful business. And that has been my experience, because I fortunately learned early enough, before I even get into business, that being helpful is not only a good way to live life, but it's also fun and super fulfilling. And the way that I approached that was essentially like through service, like being a volunteer in nonprofit organizations, like lending a hand. And that led me to understand, like, hey, when I actually do this, people notice, and I'm not going to do it for the sake of being noticed. I do it because it's nice and because it feels good. But then why wouldn't I use this for a business purpose? Like, if I'm being useful, I might as well just be generously useful. And then it would be easier for people to think, oh, if this guy is doing this for free out of his own generosity, I wonder if I hire him, How would that be?
Let's press into that a little bit more, and I'm going to press you on that a little
Yeah,
because
bring it on.
I was in ministry for a long time before doing this. That's was the intention of my life. That's who I am at my core, is someone who is involved in ministry, service-based stuff, whatever. Then after that, I became a therapist. I mean, everybody knows the story. So that mentality of service and giving almost gets dark for me, where I have had a really intentional hard choice to make of like shifting away from that into learning how to promote, not feeling shaky asking for money, so anybody who listens to this show is like me because they're the helper type folk. So
Yeah.
explain to me like how you differentiate in your mind and process through this voluntarily, I'm saying that wrong, voluntary generosity with you're still a freaking human being who has to make money.
The essence of being generous with the work that you're doing, if you're doing it, in a business space. So let me be more concrete. I do sketch notes for a living, right? I go to
Yeah,
events,
sorry.
I do these things.
We just
So
jumped the
like,
hell in, didn't we?
yeah. So like the way that, if somebody's wondering like, what is he giving, right? Like, I'm not giving away phones or anything like that. I'm just do sketch notes. So the way that I've been doing it is I've realized the value that it brings for people. So I show up at events. I do, online, sometimes like free
Mhm.
webinars and stuff like that, or even conferences like how we met. And I do the sketch
Yep.
notes and I share them. And like, this is my gift to you. Thank you for the gift of your wisdom that you pour into me, the time that you give. And this is my gift to you. There you go. And now people like Heather have it in their background, and it's something that they like it, they relish, and I realize the value of it. And I want to give it because it comes from me. Like, I want to give it. I do that for a business, but I couldn't, I don't think I would be able to be so proactive, I guess, in doing things for free too much if I didn't have a cushion that sustains my and my family's economical, means.
Right.
So I think, and I get you, because I was also in ministry for a while, and I've seen from other people too how the narrative of service becomes a sort of burden, like something that you have to do, and it's expected that you do it because it's a mandate. It's something that you should, like a regimen. Like, if you are Christian, you have to
Hmm.
serve, right? And it becomes something imposed. And that's why the term voluntary, it's so important. In creative spaces, for example, we've been told a lot, like, don't do work for free, don't, like, you value your work, don't work just for exposure. And honestly, I think that advice has, I use this word sparingly, but it's not like a trauma per se, but it's just like giving us a unwise perception of the idea of what our work can do. And then we only work for money. We don't work because we want to be helpful. And then it gets all distorted, right? So, what I understood is that when you give, it needs to come from your own will and from a standpoint of, I have something of value that I just want to give. The moment somebody tells me that I have to do something for free for them, that's not voluntary. That's
Right.
coercion, that's manipulation, that's something else, but that is not voluntary. It's from the place and the standpoint of me on my own power, my own dignity, and my own worth. I decide to give something to others as a gift, that this voluntary generosity actually works. And for somebody who has been, maybe burnout, or who is concerned about somebody else taking advantage because we are givers and we love to do, then of course, again, it's voluntary. Like, if somebody keeps demanding from us, like, we have our whole right to say, hey, no, sorry. Like, I was
Yeah.
just doing that for because I wanted to, but I can't decide when I give away my things or not. Like, you cannot come to my house and tell me that I have to give you my car and use it, right? Like, I decide if I let you borrow it, but you cannot tell me what to do with my things, right? So that's a very powerful stance when somebody comes and asks you, can you do this work for free and I can give you exposure and all that. I was like, sorry, I don't think I'm going to go that route, but I wish you all the best. And that's fair, right? But if I see
Right.
somebody that I support, that I enjoy, that I get good, learnings or lessons from them. Like for me, my journey has been going to conference or listening to podcasts and hearing thought leaders be like, man, these people have given so much. I've learned so much from them that I feel like I'm actually in an unbalanced situation in which I feel like I owe them. So doing sketch
Mm.
notes in a way is kind of like giving back. And I do it from that perspective. It's like, hey, there you go. And that's how I perceived it in a way that has kept me from establishing healthy boundaries and also allowing me to be effective. It's like I'm doing it for the purpose of helping somebody that I care for, not just like giving away because I want to feel like I'm a giver or I want to give the impression that I am like a good person or whatever. It's like
Right.
I don't care about those tags. I just do it because I care for somebody specific and it shows.
And
That
you
makes
have a
sense?
really interesting model for marketing and getting your work out there. I've been watching you, and I think it's brilliant and subtle and feels wholesome and good, and not so salesy, but it's smart. It's very, very smart. Before we I want to dive into kind of how you get your sketch notes out there, how your kind of approach to
Yeah.
marketing, what you're doing at these conferences and so forth. But for people who are like, what the hell? What do you mean you do sketch notes for a living? What is that? Bring me
Yeah.
back a little bit to your artistic journey and how you landed on this.
Super quick, I was born in a family that has a lot of artists in Costa Rica. My dad had like 13 or 14 brothers and sisters, and many of them painters, opera singers, producers, stuff like that. So I was always permeated by art. But Costa Rica is such a small market, and I saw how much they struggled with
Mm.
living just from their art that I got scared of it. So I didn't want to become a starving artist. So I went and I studied biology because that's what you do in Costa Rica, I
Biology.
guess. Biology, yes, but just for 1 year because calculus and chemistry we don't. I understand them, but I don't feel like we vibe so much. So I changed to graphic design because in that specific university, it was the closest that I could get to something artistic while being commercial because everybody needs a
Mm.
logo. And that specific career had like 8 classes of drawing. So I was like, okay, I'm doing graphic design, but I still get to scratch that itch of learning how to draw. And then I work in graphic design and I didn't enjoy it that much. So I was thinking about doing a master's degree, but because I was not making that much money, because I wasn't really super passionate about graphic design. I was like, but I like to draw. Let's find for a master's degree and let's get out of this country so that I can expand my universe, right? Expand my horizon, learn from other people, hopefully get some clients outside, and then come back to Costa Rica having clients outside that make more money and all that stuff. So I landed in Savannah, Georgia, studying illustration, and I did my master's degree there. And my idea was to do illustrations for newspapers and for magazines, what it's called like editorial mostly. And while I was there, I met my wife, well, who's not my wife, and then we got married. I stayed here, didn't go back to Costa Rica, and then we were like build a business together, try to make it there. And then I was scrolling on Instagram as one does, and I found this person who was doing sketch notes or graphic recording, and I have never heard that term, but it caught my attention. I was like, wait a minute. So she is going to conferences, and I love to go to conferences and learn because I'm a geek for learning. She's getting paid for drawing there, paid for traveling. Where do I sign up? And I realized that that company was actually in Atlanta, and I was living a few hours away. So that led me into exploring more of this world, applying to work there. And then they're called the Sketch Effect. And then they trained me, and I've been working with them ever since, like that's 2018. And they're still like I still work with them because they're awesome. They're awesome people. They do great work, and they're super cool. But I now do this thing for myself as well last year, and the story of how that came to be is another long story. But essentially, you're asking me my artistic journey, so that's how I ended up here, just doing sketch notes, which essentially is I go to conferences and I listen to the speakers, and I use my active listening skills and my drawing skills and some design skills, and I draw in real time the ideas that are being shown, which is pretty cool. Some people say it's distracting. We call it a good distraction because it brings you back to the, like, if somebody's zoning out and then they see me, it's like, oh, it's something that distracts them, but it's about the content, so they still get the full experience. And my main clients are people who do conferences, essentially. So yeah, it's pretty much in a nutshell.
I've never
You know,
seen it done
Python.
before until meeting you. That was the first time I had seen sketchnotes, and it was so cool. And I don't want to like run over the active listening part. That is like probably like one of the most unsexy, unmarketable things. Nobody wants. Somebody told me the other day that there was like two classes. There was like one on how to be a better communicator and one on how to be a better listener. Nobody went to the better listener one. They all went to how to be a better communicator. But people don't realize listening is communication, and that is
Yeah,
like imperative to become a great storyteller, a great communicator. I want to get into how you're marketing your sketch notes and the way that you're using generosity to do that. I think it's really brilliant. But before then, if you wouldn't mind us just taking a little side road real quick, I'm
yeah,
curious about the active listening technique and how you've been able to sharpen that. I
yeah,
think we can all relate to being in a conversation and then your mind wandering a little bit, no matter who the communicator is. And there's a cost to that when we aren't present. We're not learning the way that we could be learning. We're not, our ideation suffers because we're not coming up with better ideas because we're tapped out. I mean, there's a list of it. So how have you like kind of learned to sharpen that where you can literally be drawing while somebody's talking and create what you created there?
as you would expect, I'm the kind of guy that when I was in school, I'll be drawing in my notebooks while the teacher was talking, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when I was in this youth group in ministry, I would go to the meetings and I'll be like drawing on my notebook things because I'm fidgety. I need to be doing something, and I knew I was gonna get called on. Like somebody was gonna say, "Hey, you!" Like, "Hey, Alejo, are you paying attention?" Or what would you just say? So because I knew, I forced myself to pay attention so that if they ask me, I will respond back. Yeah, you were talking about this. Oh
Mm,
yeah, I think about this stuff, and I will participant. I'll be participant. Yeah, I guess of the
yeah.
conversation. So it came as a kind of reflex, a defensive reflex of like I wouldn't want somebody to call me out and say that I'm like the distracted guy who's not paying attention, whatever. Like I'm gonna pay attention and show them take that, right? Now the other thing that actually helped, that is something that honestly a lot of most of the sketchnoters don't talk about. Now actually I feel it's just kind of so overlooked, is that from my experience at least, learning how to discern what's a main idea from what is just fluff came
Mm,
from actually reading comprehension. So
mm,
I had some classes of like fast reading when I was in school. I was like 10 years old or something like that, and I read not like a lot, but I read a lot, and I enjoy reading. And there was something about the training of my teachers. Like I can't pinpoint exactly who it was, but they taught me like very well how to synthesize ideas, how to make summaries, and because you can see text, you can kind of chew on those things and verify if that's actually the good idea. It's harder in a conversation because words just fly away. But the training of my brain of understanding main ideas when I read them, which is essentially I hear them in my head and then I distill what's the information, was actually a conversation of myself with the text, with the pages, and then translated to a conversation with the ideas that other people are saying, of me saying essentially, what is this person trying to say? What is this text saying? What is the idea behind this? And I question the text and I question
mm,
what's going there. So that led me to develop good foundations for active listening. And then just the development that I had of being in ministry and learning counseling and learning about these leadership techniques of being present and having good role models taught me how when somebody's saying something, like you should be paying attention. There's certain things that you can do to verify that the information that you're getting is correct. So getting all that feedback and all that practice helped me to be a better listener. The added factor to that is that my native language is Spanish. So when I come here to the US and I have to do this in English, I, I have to force myself to pay even more attention because I cannot allow myself to just let it slip because I feel like I'm not understanding or there's a word that I don't get. When I started in my journey for like reading and learning more English, I started reading in books in English that were a little bit ahead of my level of English that I had currently. And there were a lot of words that I didn't understand. But instead of like stopping at every word and trying to find a dictionary, I would like pause for a little bit. I was like, what is this about? What is the main idea here? What is the gist, the gut feeling that I have about this? And that's how I think I develop an idea of context. I don't have to know the specificity of the words, but I can understand the idea behind them. And so those are a few things that have helped me to develop this active listening thing. And I have some other metaphors that I use because I've trained and done workshops on this. One of them is like a piñata, for example. So when you're listening to things, a lot of people who are sketchnoters and beginners, they have this sense that they have to capture everything, that everything's important, they cannot distill. And I have this analogy or metaphor that it's like when you go to a piñata, a party, and there's a piñata, and like somebody goes and crushed it. That's like the flood of information that you get. And in that piñata, you have like candies, and then you have like one in Costa Rica, we had like peanuts, and we have other candies that are like, whatever. And we have different kinds of candies. An experienced person who has gone to a lot of parties, in their youth, and has attested to that what you want to do is just to capture the big candy because that's where it's at, right? Like you want a big bar, chocolate bar, like you don't want, a little bit of mint, whatever, So the way that you play with active listening is like when you see something that resonates, like makes the audience laugh, or suddenly there's like a pause that is like, oh, there was a shift here in the conversation. That's the stuff that you want to capture. There's the big things, and then the other small ideas, just like let them go. Like it's fine. You don't have to capture everything. And when you think about your approach to active listening as a piñata, not only is like more feasible to understand, okay, I'm just going to capture these big ideas and be satisfied with them, but also piñatas are fun. Like, well, until somebody gets hurt, but piñatas are, especially hard, fun. So having that mentality of I'm approaching this not from the nervousness of I'm going to leave something behind or I'm going to miss on something, but I'm doing something that is exciting, that is enjoyable, and that is also delicious, then I think the mindset helps a lot when you're paying attention. And so, yeah, that's one approach that I tell people in seems to help.
How much of this is intuitive versus tactical sorting? So the candy falls on the floor and you grab kind of the big stuff and you're okay with leaving the rest on the floor. When you're reaching for what you do reach for, is that more of a trained ear for like something tactical, or is it intuitive?
There are some tactical things that you can learn, like moments that signify something important is coming. For example, somebody says, hey, I'm going to share with you 3 tips to grow your business. It's like, okay, I know there's going to be a list. I'm going to listen to number 1, number 2, number 3. Right. That's pretty straightforward. Sometimes they will say, I'm going to share with you some advice about how to improve your business. Okay, what's the advice? And in that case is kind of intuitive until there's a point in which you notice that the person is circling back on the same idea. Like they share, yeah, you need to do your marketing because that's important to get leads. And when you do your marketing, well, it's like stuck in marketing. Okay, marketing might be one of the points because it's being reinforced throughout what the person is saying. But there's also an aspect there that it comes to just what resonates with you most. I've heard this a lot from people who read, like any book, people who read the Bible, or people who read like books that are for self-development. It's like, I read this thing once and I loved it. When I read it for the second time, there was so much more meaning that I didn't capture the first time. And the book is the same, but the person that is reading it has changed. And the priorities and the understanding or the things that are important for them has changed as well. So we're looking for things that are different. And there's a truth to that in sketchnotes as well, that we're humans, right? When we're doing sketch notes, we're listening from our personal experience as well. So we're capturing
Right.
things that we also perceive as important. And there might be some people who might think that other things are important that I didn't capture. It's not the point to capture all the important, like the straightforward, like this is the only important things. It's like there are important things for everybody. But at the end of the day, you're capturing essences, I guess. And that's what matters. It's not an expectation of perfection, but an interpretation of what's happening in there that actually gives that kind of connection with like the content that is being said, the understanding that people are having or the sketch noter are having, and how that also adds a layer of meaning to the people who are attending or the audience or the people who are consuming this content. One thing that I do, for example, is when I have a very visual brain, as you can imagine. So when
Mm-hmm.
somebody tells me something, I immediately tend to think about how something could represent or communicate this idea visually, right? If you tell me something that has to do with failure, like I think about an ice cream falling down and the kid like super sad about it. I think about somebody, scooting in a banana or something like that, and I immediately think about ways to represent it. So when I do those drawings, most people don't think in that way. And when they see those drawings, that's my interpretation of the concepts that I'm hearing. Some of them are actually like even comics, like cartoons, and people are like talking with each other, speech balloons, and saying jokes, small like snippets, like New Yorker cartoons in there. And that's stuff that ignited my creativity from what I heard, not specifically what the speaker said, but that reinforces the meaning. So people appreciate that because even though it's not the main idea, it's an interpretation of the idea. It
Yeah.
reminds them of the main idea, and it makes it more memorable.
Have you ever had like a speaker like suck? It was just like really not good. You really did just like, I just don't even have a takeaway from that. Like, what do you do then?
Well, I draw a very big picture. Cover all the space. Well, the most challenging one has actually been like there's two that come to mind. One of them, it was not the speaker's fault, it was just the content and the nature of the session, because it was like a workshop kind of tutorial, like essentially how to draw your avatar to do this thing. So you go and click in this thing and then you do, and like that's not big ideas. Like I can hunt for some big ideas there, like okay, this person is teaching this for what purpose, like why should people pay attention to this and care about creating this thing. And that's what I try to capture. That comes from like interpretation and a lot of you know trying to figure out what is this person talking about. But it's not very conducive for doing step one, step two, step three of click here, and see what happens in the screen. Like that's not what sketch notes are for necessarily in the context of what I do. And then the other one, and that one was painful. This was for it was an internal meeting of people who were talking about mining techniques, and many of the sessions were okay, but there was one that was so technical it just came to be stuff about regulations
Mm,
and budgets and a lot of words that I had no idea what they meant.
mm.
So what I did in that one is like I captured what I could, and then at the end I just talked with the person who was speaking. I was like, "Hey, I have a few white spots, spaces left in this. What else do you think it would be important to show in there?"
Oh, that's smart.
And sometimes I do that. Actually, in Creative South, when you were like the second day, my brain was about to fry, and I actually had to leave the room for a bit for a refresh. The sessions were like back to back, and when I came back, the next session had started. So I had to ask my wife, who was with me, like, what did she talk about in the first part? And she had pay attention to part of it, but she had also zoned out. So at the end, we have to go to the speaker and tell him, hey, I was doing this thing, I was able to capture this thing, but unfortunately, I missed the beginning of your talk. Like, is there a way that I can get, the PowerPoints or something like that?
Mm.
So she gave them to me, and I like fill them up with that. And I think that's fine. Like ideally you want to capture everything on the go and live, but sometimes for X or Y reason that's not completely possible. I am humble enough to accept that and be like, hey, I need help with this, or
Yeah.
what else can I do here? some people were like completely freak out, and imposter syndrome comes, like maybe I'm not cut out for this, like I'm like, whatever, like, I'm a human. I'm not perfect in this. I do my best, and my best right now is to ask for help. So sometimes, yeah, sometimes it's hard, and that's probably one of the reasons too that I tailor my approach talking about marketing. Like, my ideal client is people who do conferences that are for self-development, growth, branding, marketing, all that stuff, because that's the stuff that I vibe with. That's stuff that I eat and breathe all day, and that I love and enjoy, and has a lot of imagery and possibility for metaphors. So, you know, I can do a gig for a mining company. Again, that's fine. For lawyers who are talking about, commerce and fair trade and all that stuff, that's
Yeah.
fine. Like, I can serve them, definitely. I get super hyped about doing it for people who are talking about self-development and growth.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's walk through how you get your message out there within the context of generosity. So here's how I understand it, and then you fill in the blank. So you go to a ton of conferences, you are great with people, you meet people, you do the thing. While people are speaking, you do the sketch note, and I believe you send the speakers the sketch note, and then you have an email where you have sketch notes available, I believe, for purchase from like the general public.
Yes and no, but you have
Yeah.
the gist of it.
Walk me through it.
I first of all, the going to conferences and doing this, like, I pay to go to the conference and I do it out of that. I've done it twice, and the first one was our Creative South. Before that, what I would join is Instagram Lives, free webinars. I will even listen to content and podcasts and stuff like that. But essentially, and I was just having an Instagram Live earlier today, and I was talking about, like, you need to be where your ideal clients are. And if it's not possible for you to attend an in-person conference and get to meet them in person, there's so many free webinars happening all the time that there's just no excuse to not be there. So the way that I started was actually when I left my full-time job and I started doing this full-time. I hired a coach, and the first advice that she told me was that I should show more of my work, and I should show up to this sort of events and do at least one a week. And last year, like every week, I was showing up to a free webinar. I was showing up to an Instagram Live, a LinkedIn Live. And if I didn't have any of those, I will do a podcast of somebody that I admire, that I love their content, and then share it with them. And that's the first thing, like, you show up where they are. And if they're in those platforms, if they're in those events, like, you show up there and do it. The strategy of doing it in conferences.
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
In the webinars and the podcast, you're essentially doing the same thing. You're listening to the content and then you're summarizing it in a drawing. And did you like send it to the leaders? What did you do with that?
Yeah. So it was funny because, like, the first one, the first one that I attended, it was a webinar. This guy, when he started the webinar, said, "Hey guys, thank you for joining. I apologize in advance for my PowerPoint presentations. I haven't done PowerPoint since I was in college, but the message is there, I promise." So I was like, well, maybe I could do something that he could use later for his PowerPoint presentation. So I started taking sketch notes, right? And he finished his content for the webinar, and then he got Q&A. So during the Q&A, I finished it, I polished it, and I published it while the webinar was still going. So the trick with that is, like, they are already there. So you share them when they're available. Because if you wait a day, 2 days before or something, it might get lost, especially people who have a lot of following, or a lot of people who are commenting and all that. But if you're posting at the same time that they're there, you have more likelihood for people to see it. And I posted, and he was like, well, this is awesome. And then he contacted me and then hired me, right, for doing a sketch note for him. So that's essentially the strategy. Like, you attend there and you do it live, and then you post it while it's happening, and then, or you share it with them while it's happening. And then if they share it, then that's great. That's free marketing because they publish it for their own following, right? But if they don't post it, then you post it yourself, and it's like, hey, this is the work that I did. I learned this and this and this from that. So yeah, that's
I,
essentially
I
how
think
it
that's
started.
really important because what you said earlier about finding a need and meeting it and helping, there is a level of ownership that you're taking when you hear dudes say, hey, my PowerPoint sucks or isn't working or whatever. And you're like, I could come in and help him and fix that and do it. And the initiative that takes is kind, but it's also so smart when you're thinking about your business and marketing. And so I'm kind of having some ahas here where I'm thinking about how do we reframe service from a victim mentality to a very strong stance of, like you said earlier, I have something valuable to give and I'm going to give it to you out of the kindness of my heart. And that's a very empowering stance versus like, I've got to give you this for free. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also, I have a thing like, I feel like anybody who has some degree of success in life, whatever success means to you, which to me is essentially you're satisfied with your life, like you live
Mm,
a good life and you feel like you have no lack of anything important. For me, that's success. And then when you see people who are successful, who live successfully, you realize that in some deeply ingrained in their minds, they feel like they're worth it. Like
mm,
they're not asking people for their leftovers. They don't come apologizing for things. They just say like, "I'm sorry for taking your time." It's like, no, thank you for your time. That's different than saying,
yeah.
"I'm sorry for taking your time." So
Right.
those sort of things is something that I've learned through because I used to be, I'm a recovering people pleaser,
Sure. Yeah.
and understanding that now is like I don't have to apologize for things. I can own my space and I can bring something to it and I can actually add something good to it. Then the perspective there shifts. And when I'm doing these tests initially, because I hired this mentor, she told me to do this thing, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do it because I'm paying you to implement things. I'm not paying you for just listening stuff. I'm also testing if my assumptions are true. My
Mm,
assumption is what I do is valuable. Um, Part of that is because I've gathered proof of other work that I've seen and that I've done for other companies and for other people that have generated results. But for myself, like, do I know that my own sketch notes, when I do them for like by myself for my own initiative, are they really, really, really valuable? Or is
mm-hmm.
it just that I enjoy them too much that I think they're valuable? So when you show up and you do them, you get feedback. There's no good or bad feedback. There's just data that when you see it, it's like, did it work? Yes, no, and why? And what can I do now differently? So this approach, happily, it worked for me really quickly. I was like, okay, people are noticing, people like it, people are resharing. There seems to be something good about that. But once I've done 10 of those, it's like, okay, I have a pattern now. I have a trend and I have proof. So when I have sales conversations and somebody, yeah, so what's the value of this? It's like, well, I can tell them, how people, when they share this stuff, how engagement has gone through the roof, how people, when they go to a conference and they see this thing, they freak out in a good way, right? And like take selfies and all that stuff. It's like, I have proof, I have seen it. It's not just in my head, but
Right.
because I put it out there first to test it. So I think that's a good way to see the approach of when you're doing these things also from a business standpoint. You're trying to gather feedback and see what works because essentially, again, what you're trying to do is you want to do something that is helping somebody. So you do it first. If it doesn't help, then try a different approach. But if it helps, then try more of that, tweak it a little bit. Now to go back to the kind of process of that, I started doing this like weekly sketch notes. I
Mm-hmm.
also forced myself to do them because I have a newsletter and I would put like a weekly sketch note there.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew I
Mm-hmm.
had to show something to the audience there. And that also helped me generate my own portfolio. But it was initially just online events that I could find because I didn't have necessarily the budget at that point to go to conferences. I went to Creative South last year and I did my sketch notes on a notebook and all that. Some people like it and it was cool. And then for this year, I was like, let's try something different because I've heard a lot about lead magnets. And I feel like now as a business, I need to know how to do lead magnets to attract clients. So I want to know how they work. I want to know if I can do one. And I thought, okay, maybe I can do the sketch notes for Creative South, and maybe I can use them as a lead magnet. See if people are actually interested in downloading them, and actually have a measurable way of saying this is how much it worked. And like 30 plus people downloaded those sketch notes from Creative South, which I thought it was pretty successful for me. Is like if 5 people share, like download it, it's like yeah, it's probably there must be something there that didn't work. But more than 30 people for me, it's solid evidence. Without anybody promoting it, because nobody at the conference said, "Hey, Alejo's doing sketches for this. Go and get them." Right? It
Right.
was just me, word of mouth, talking to people, showing what I was doing. And so with Creative South, I just tested it. I was like, I want to see if I'm capable of doing 14 sketch notes in 2 days, because I've never done that. I did it. I want to see if I'm capable of creating a lead magnet that works, that is simple, and that people are actually interested in. I did it. And I did it for free because it's the first time that I was doing that. I didn't want to charge for something that I don't know yet if it works. Like, it doesn't make sense, right?
Right.
So I did it for free for that reason. And after that, I think the next step would have been like following up. But I told people like, hey, I'm gonna just delete your email after you. This is just for downloading this thing. I'm not gonna follow up, which might have been just putting a bullet in my foot or something like that, because then I cannot access those people who are already interested. But the intention of that was not to get leads, just to test the service and the product, I guess.
Yeah.
To give it away for people and then to test it. It was actually not in my agenda or my intention, or even in the realm of possibilities, to be like, doing this sketch notes would allow me to have a podcast to be on a podcast with some of the speakers. Like, I didn't think about that. When you shared this, everything that you do, I was like, she's cool. I love her content. So I like share it to you. And then we talked during the event. It was like, yeah, like absolutely. Why not? Like, let's just send it to her, I spoke with Nick also, Nick Van, and I sent it to him, and I was on his podcast too. But those were not things that I was looking for. My aim with doing the sketches and give them to you is like give you a surprise, because I bet you didn't expect that, and give you back on the time that you gave back by being at the conference. So that's the test one for the Forward event, who was a few weeks ago. I also paid to go to that conference. I wanted to go to that conference. And then I thought, hey, maybe they can hire me. And then I reached out. We couldn't make it work. But the idea of selling the sketch notes came out. And I told to the organizer, like, hey, even if you don't hire me because you don't have at this point the capacity to handle all this stuff, then I'm just going to do it for myself and see how it works. So again, I went to the conference. Nobody knew me, because like none of the attendees knew me, because it was a realtor and lender conference, right? And an artist, yay! And nobody promoted it. Well, I could say one of the speakers promoted it, like share my stuff, but not on stage. It was all like word of mouth, people seeing me doing stuff, and I still got like 30 plus people who had bought so far those sketch notes. So in that event, I was testing a lot of things. I was testing, what if I do a pre-sale? Would people be interested in buying something that I haven't created yet? Well, it turns out that if they don't know that I'm doing it, then it's very hard for them to buy it. So I just got like 3 people who already knew me who buy it, but nobody from that event. Everybody bought after the event. So that's one thing. There's something that I could tweak next time, maybe in advance, try to make people or connect with people who go to the event in advance to show that I'm doing this. Number 2, would people be able or willing to buy this stuff, and for how much? Like, what's a price point that could be reasonable for the work and the value that I'm giving, and also for the demographic, right? People who are real estate and who are doing like mortgages. Very different from a creative conference where you see a lot of college students as well. So that was something that could be validated there, and it worked out. Then how to make a process for people to pay it, because I hadn't done that before. So I had to learn a lot of things on the go. And I think at the end of the day, the main thing for this was not to sell them and make a lot of money out of them, even though I almost recuperated the investment that I took in paying for going to the conference and the flights and all that stuff, which was great. The main point of that was like, I'm going to a space where there's people who could hire me, and I'm the only person doing what I do in this scenario, the odds of me getting business from here are very big. So I'm not just gonna go and just, I'm just do sketch notes or whatever. It's like I'm gonna go all in and do something that is high quality, that is the best work that I've ever done, to show to people, gather proof again that I do what I do and I do it well, and that they can trust me to hire me if that's a good fit for them. So that's what I did. And I didn't just send them JPEGs. Like, I created a booklet with a cover and a story and like a lot of things that they can sell. I tested, what's it called, like availability. So like people can buy them until July 31st and then they're gone. I'm not gonna share them or sell them anywhere else. And that's it. And see if that works out.
Hmm.
So I tested all those things, and essentially what I'm doing is just experimenting. There might be a misconception if somebody sees that this is working for me. There's like, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. It's like I'm guessing, and then I'm finding out as I test it. And I think that's the whole mindset that we should have as creatives. We love to experiment. Why not experiment with the things that we're doing business with to figure out what works? I feel like it's so it makes so much sense. You don't have to wait until you have it figured out. You figure it out while you're doing it.
Right. Well, I mean, let's press into that a little bit more, just your kind of mentality with it, because it can be discouraging, and there is this element of urgency with it when you get to be our age and we have families. And I was telling somebody earlier today, we're not 20 anymore and can't just eat ramen on the floor. Like, this is serious stuff. And so I guess, how do you kind of wrap your experimental, curious, playful mind when it comes to business, and also ground it in something that keeps you steady, emotionally? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah. So I think I go back to having that cushion. Like when
Mm-hmm.
you have your needs met, then you have the space to experiment.
Well,
It's
we got to
very,
question what our needs are too, because, like,
yeah.
I think from a Western perspective, we think we need a lot,
Mm,
and we don't need as much. We could probably be more, and I'm just as guilty as this,
yeah.
have more freedom if we let go of a little bit of the comfort stuff. Sorry to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
needs is a really important word there.
Yeah. If you have food on the table, you have a roof over your head, and I guess that's the main two things. Like I
Yeah.
could I could I could live with that, if I and have health, those are the main things that are the most important. Beyond that, it's just a sense of community and having somebody, a partner or like a solid group of friends that can support you in that area of like relationships. But I guess in terms of what you need to survive, like there's difference between living with an approach of I need to do this because otherwise I die, like, or I
Hmm.
go starving, and I starve, versus I have the freedom to experiment because even if it fails, I'm okay.
Hmm.
And that's the situation in which I allow myself to be when I exit my full-time job. I didn't just like left everything and then just with my free time and my savings try to build this business. I have retainer clients, right? And I have other
Right.
projects that was there. So that allowed me to have this freedom to use my time in these other ways, exploratory ways. It sounds like privilege, right? Like being able to do those things is not something that everybody can afford. And it is, in reality, now it's the kind of privilege that is earned, like I know that might ruffle some feathers because
No,
there's
I
some people
love
who
that. I love
but
that.
there's
Keep going.
yeah, but there's some people who experience genuinely, what's the word? Ge- Genuinely, I'm not gonna say that word. They really
That's
experience
why I
with
like you, because I
hardship.
mispronounce words all the time. Like, I don't know if you see my videos. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's like not planned. I'm like, what did that say?
Yeah. So people generally, there you go,
Yeah.
experience some people experience some hardship, and in society there are constructs and things that are not built to favor them in some way, and there's some people
Right.
who definitely have it easier than others. That is not an excuse to play victim, right? And it can be harder, that doesn't mean it's impossible. The moment that you say that it's impossible, well, that's it, game over, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like having this possibility, it may just require more time, and that's it. Like that's just it. What you will need to have is just that endurance, and that like tweak your expectation to feel like, yeah, I'm gonna be a millionaire in 3 years, to like, hey, this might take me 10 years to get there,
Yeah.
but it I only will get there if I keep going. And that's the thing, like a lot of people don't just, they just want stuff that is microwavable, right? If that's a word. Like it takes time, it really takes time. I'm 36, turning 37 in a week actually, and it's taking me a while to get here. Like
Mm-hmm.
most of my 20s I made like almost zero money.
Yeah.
And I see
True.
so many people who are in their 20s making so much money, and I'm like, well, good for them. They're gonna be so much better when they're my age, hopefully, if they take smart decisions. My thing was I focused so much on my growth as a person, on maturity and understanding who I am and what's my place in this world, that I feel like some people who have been focused only on money in their 20s, then they have to figure crisis of identities because they have all
Yeah.
this money but they don't know who they are. So there's no like better or worse, there's just different paths. I feel like as soon as you realize that figuring out life is just living life and keep living life and keep trying to figure it out, it's not like I got to figure it out and that's it,
Yeah.
then I feel like your expectation is going to be aligned, and that's going to make it easy for you to keep going and to endure the effort that actually takes to do great things.
That's so good. Let's see if I did a good job listening and summarizing what you shared today. So here's what I heard. I heard that when you have a skill set, it is not just kind, it's smart for your business to ask yourself, how can I use this skill set to meet the need and genuinely help people? You
Mhm.
go and you find where your ideal people are at, you put yourselves in those rooms, and then you ask yourself, how can I use my skill to help that person? Now, when you do that, you're also testing your idea, because what you want to do is you want to be able to get results back of how your work helped them, so you can take those results and use that to then be able to market and level up your offerings, charge more, etc. That's what I heard today. Is there anything I missed or that you would add?
Beautiful summary. That was it in a nutshell. See, our conversation could have been 2 minutes.
I should have drawn that while you were talking, and it would have been terrible. It would have been oh, there's my sketch note of you. Listen, I got one final question for you.
Yeah.
But thank you for your time. Brian and I got to sit down with you and your beautiful wife, and you'll have wonderful hearts, genuine people, and you're talented, obviously, but also too, I can feel just like the hand of God on you both, and that there's something really special that you're called to do. And it's just really cool getting to chat with you once again.
Yeah.
Where would you like to point our listeners to if they want to connect with you?
Yeah. If they want to connect with me, I am on social media on Instagram and LinkedIn. I like to tell people Instagram's my neighborhood. If you want to make friends or be inspired by the stuff that I do, or connect and chat, then Alejo Porras Art altogether,
Mm-hmm.
ART. And if you want to do business, LinkedIn is downtown where I go commute to work. So if you want to connect with me, maybe follow me first and like be active so that I can notice who you are, or tell me some context, because if you just send me a connection request, I would not accept it if I don't know you. And I think that's it. That's pretty much
Awesome.
where I'm at.
Awesome.
I want to say one quick thing. When I was accepted to the university here in the United States, I was very excited, and I felt like I was going to come here to learn and to enjoy and to be nurtured by everything and everybody here. And my mentor at the time sit with me before I left and told me, I'm so happy that you get to live this experience. I just want to remind you something. You may think that you're going there to get something, to learn, to enjoy, to grow, and that's partially true. But maybe, just maybe, you're going there because you have the answer to a prayer somebody has. and you're the only person who has a specific context, background, wisdom, experience for that person to learn it. So you carry a gift with you. Remember that everywhere you go, you bring something. Don't just keep it to yourself. And I live by that. Like every space that I joined, I believe that I have something of value, that I've been there for a purpose. And because living from that mentality has helped all of these other things happen for me. So just wanted to show that, because there's a deeper core belief that I have there, that I'm on a mission essentially. And I'm true to myself when I'm giving myself, when I'm giving the best of myself. So just want to leave it there.
Well, I hope it was a joy having you. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.